I'll start with a quick review for this book, Prisoners of Geography. I'll give this book, I thought about giving it a 4, but I haven't gave a 5 for a long time, so I'll give this book a 5 stars. Really, really good book. I highly recommend it. Learned a lot about geography. In general, I'm a big fan of geography, especially geopolitics, which he have long discussions about it. Short. It's not too long of a book. Short, right to the point. No much messing around, and no much uninteresting or long stories. I was highly engaged. Most, like I would say, more than 90% of the time, I was highly engaged and learned quite a lot. He has very good analysis. He doesn't take a partisan view on things, not biased, and really good analysis. Short, right to the point. So I give a lot of compliments here, but I really recommend it, especially if you like geopolitics and geography. Could be it's a little outdated, I'm sure, but not that much. I think maybe around 2015, 2016, so it's not that old. And definitely some good things to learn from there. Also, I like how it divided into things. So it's a good one. I really recommend. Let's see the notes. Countries are always looking for higher grounds to protect their country. So the higher you are, the easier it is to protect your country or your area. One reason India and China were not engaging in a big war is due to the Himalayas. They have the Himalayas around them, extremely high terrain, and that's one of the reasons they didn't had a war. They would have a war if it was a flat land. Russia is hard to conquer since from one side it's Siberia and from the other it's flat but very long, which makes it harder for supply. So many countries try to conquer Russia. One side, I think no one tried so far from Siberia, but the other side, many people tried. I think it was Germany, it was France. And the problem there is flat and very long. It's big, vast, and supplies chains usually have a harder time supplying, and usually that's why it's really hard to conquer. Russia is twice the size of the US, but half of the population. It seems big on the map, but not as twice as big. But it's interesting to have twice as big, but only half the population. It's a rough area, especially Siberia, and many places are uninhabitable. Russia needs Crimea since it's their access to warm water. That's why they want Crimea. Crim, yeah, like I don't know how to exactly. Some call it Crim, some call it Crimea. And for sure is that's their access for warm water, which is not in Siberia side, and it's easier to trade through, and that's why they want it. Vietnam is more likely to be friends with China over time since they share a border. So Vietnam right now is supported by the US. They're like buying most things from the US, and especially all the guns and things like that. But they're more likely to be friends with China because they have a border, and it's better for them to be friends with China than the US. It's a prediction. China is deferring to lure Taiwan instead of taking it by power, as the West would not like it. So they won Taiwan. They tried to do it by power before, but right now they're trying to lure them in with all kinds of benefits and easier trade and things like that. Because if they would take it by power, the West would not like it, and sanctions and things like that would follow. China is posing a threat to the US more than Europe and Russia. So Europe and Russia both posing some threat to the US about who is the biggest power, from who you buy guns and all the equipment, army equipment. But China is even more, and they're also more spread out, and they're doing better job than Europe and Russia as a global power. Western Europe has plenty of rain, good soil, and sea access, which allows trade, and it's also good, very good trade. So that's why many countries in West Europe have and are pretty successful. So they have good soil, they have enough rain, they can grow stuff, and they have sea access, which is very important also for trade. So that's why they all have that. They're more successful. Greece has very few valleys and coastal access, which hurt trade and implode urban development. They don't have much valleys. Urban development mostly takes place in valleys or flat areas, which they don't have. Their coastal access is not very good, which both hurt trade. Africa doesn't have good harbors, and the rivers are full of waterfalls. So harbors, it has to be deep and close to the beach or to the land. In Africa doesn't have much of them. And the rivers are also have much waterfalls which trade cannot go through. So usually you can have ships, but if there's waterfalls, you cannot have it. Egypt has no trees for building and is highly dependent on the Nile River, which is used by some countries in Africa. What happened in Egypt? They have no trees, barely. They don't have water, basically, not much water, and therefore they're highly dependent on the Nile River. The problem is that there is also many countries in Africa that also rely on it, and there could be a lot of disputes. That's what the author explains. There could be a lot of disputes about that water source. So if they put in a dam up in the river, Egypt could have problems with that. There is always some disputes. There is already some disputes about water between Egypt and some African countries. China is now becoming more involved in Africa, which makes their diplomatic ties different as they try to protect their wealth. So China is more and more involved in Africa, and now they're trying to protect their wealth, and they become more involved, and they're going to do things to protect their wealth. And that's similar to what the US is already doing, and Europe in some places. When there is some disputes, and it happens many times in the Middle East, that the US stands with a particular side in the fight in this particular country to protect their investment, or to protect oil. That's what usually happening with the US. They want to protect their oil, and they get involved more. The Middle East is how it's seen from Europe. The middle of the East. I was always wondering, what's the Middle East exactly? So this is how Europe see the Middle East. It's the middle, it's the East, the whole area is the East, and that's the middle of the East. And that's how it's seen from Europe. So interesting piece of data. The Sunni, or Sunni, and I call them exactly, consider themselves as the Orthodox Muslims. That's the difference, main difference between them. Then consider themselves the Orthodox, and they're more religious in some way. Iran has many ethnic minorities which can cause a revolution. Internal peace is very important. So they have many minorities, which I was not aware about. And internal peace, for example, is very important to avoid inner conflicts between all those minorities. Turkey borders 3 seas, which makes them valuable for trade and partners. They have 3 seas, I forgot the names, but they have three sea access and different seas, which makes them a very good place to trade and to be partnered with. So the US is trying, Russia is trying, and I think China is too. India and Pakistan are longtime enemies who had a major war between them. So that's a whole episode about it. Interesting stuff. Pakistan has many ethnic minorities who risk taking the country apart. A lot of inner conflict in Pakistan since they have many minorities. Kashmir is highly important for both countries, it's Pakistan and India, as it access to China and Afghanistan. The Kashmir, it gives easy access to China and Afghanistan, and that's, I think it's happened after the book got out. There was India took over Kashmir by force. There was like a huge dispute there, and they closed the city, or whatever you call it, Kashmir. I don't know if it's a city exactly. It could be a province. I don't know. The thing is that they took it over by force, and no internet, and it was like not very cool. But it's important. The thing here is that it's important part as it gives access to Afghanistan and China, so easier for trade. China is supporting North Korea since they don't have, or they don't want, refugees. Interesting. I was wondered why they give it. They try to help them that much. And there are most of the trade North Korea has is with China. And one of the reasons is that if there is problem, even with a war even with the US or with South Korea, they get a lot of refugees which they do not want. California, Arizona, and Texas were in Mexico's controls before the war. They had a major war, and they took over most of California, Arizona, and Texas. China is trying to lure in some South American countries, trying to get them also for trade and easier access, which the US does not like because it's in their backyard, so to speak. Despite their large size, Brazil had struggled with trade as the land does not allow efficient transportation and crop development. They are huge. I think the biggest country in South America. They had big promises, or very promising. The problem is that their land is kind of a rough land, which does not allow efficient transportation and crop development. So they're starting to they become better now with crop exports, but not as much as they could. The Arctic is a major territorial dispute between countries around it, to whom it belongs. There is a major dispute who owns the Arctic. There is many countries that claimed it's their own, and most countries around it, which is I think Japan, I don't know Japan, Russia for sure, Norway, and some more other countries, the US obviously because of Alaska. Russia is heavily investing in defense around the Arctic, and one of his points is that Russia will try to take it over. Everyone will try to take it over because it's very promising. It has a lot of oil in there, and as global warming advances, it will be more and more accessible. And there's also very good coastal access from China to the west. It's faster, and Russia is heavily investing. Russia has many icebreakers ships while the US has only one. That was back then. I think he said like Russia has around 30 and the US only has one, and that's for doing for war or any other problems happens around the Arctic. And the US is not ready. That's the point there. That's it for the notes, and very, very good book. I highly recommend it. Very good points and easily accessed, written very well, very engaging, and very easy to understand. I highly recommend. Thank you.